So the news finally dropped. Look, we've been getting inklings that this had either been done, close to done, or was kind of waiting to happen for a while. And I want you to notice this is what, May 22nd when this is going down. So I expect this to become official either in the next couple of days. If not, if there's a wait for this to become officially announced by the Cleveland Browns, then it will happen probably post June 1st when some of that money technically clears up. But this is the last domino to fall in the offseason. The Browns have agreed to terms with Jadevon Clowney, bringing him back for a second year with the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, he had a very successful first year, one of his best years that he's had since his days in Texas, in Houston with J.J. Watt. 1 year, $11 million, so a nice upgrade. I think last year he signed for about 1 year, $8 million, so a nice raise for Jadevon Clowney, some short-term money and some short-term security for the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, Clowney comes into this with injury history, but that being said, he was healthy last year in his role that they asked him to play in. He was excellent, and now this kind of just solidifies things on the defensive line, right? You have Myles Garrett, you have Jadevon Clowney. Those are two known entities, right? Then you can rotate in a Chase Winovich. Then you can see whatever you can get out of Alex Wright in year one. And then you can have Perrion Winfrey, Taven Bryant on the inside, and I think you'll be fine. Or Perrion Winfrey, whoever wins that battle out, or somebody else other than Perrion Winfrey. But you can figure out the inside a lot easier now that you have Jadevon Clowney. And if they're able to get this deal done, and if the team announces this before June 1st, that might be an indicator that they have more cap space than people assume. And I wouldn't expect them to be out the market for any more veterans depending on when this gets announced, right? That tells you everything because the team can't announce something until they have that deal signed. They can't have the deal signed until they technically have enough space. If they have to wait till June 1st to announce this, and that tells you they're kind of running low on whatever space that they have for this year. If they can announce this as soon as possible, then it's a done deal, right? They can bring in more people, more money. And again, this is what I was saying on when people had these concerns, was Baker's money holding up the Cleveland Browns in any way? No, it's just they don't want to pay it, right? It's not necessarily they can't pay it or they're paying it's going to get in their way with that $18 million. It's more or less they just don't want to. For some flexibility purposes, like let's say somebody becomes available in a trade, then all of a sudden they don't have that free $18 million to bring in the salary. But other than that, as far as free agency goes at this point, they can bring in guys and it's not going to be a concern for next season. So this is the last domino for the Cleveland Browns season. I think in free agency to fall, obviously the next domino to fall is Baker Mayfield, and we'll follow that when that happens. But honestly, I would expect something soon to happen with that. I think the most likely thing for Baker Mayfield at this point is a release, because it doesn't make much sense for the Cleveland Browns to keep him on the roster. I know people try to tell you he's a trade resource. I find that hard to believe when teams were willing to give up a third-round pick to move up in the draft to take Matt Corral over what would have been less compensation, maybe a little bit more money, but less draft compensation to get Baker Mayfield. Once you reach that point of people don't want him like that, then it's hard for me to believe that he's a trade asset. And I think you're just holding out, hoping for hope that somebody wants somebody that nobody, like if Drew Brees decided to come out of retirement, I think people would rather take a chance at that. They would rather kick the tires on Phillip Rivers if you're a win now team. I just don't think there is a good use case for a lot of teams to want to trade for Baker Mayfield, because the team that wants to trade for Baker Mayfield has to be in this weird area where they're not necessarily a win now team, because if I were a win now team, I wouldn't want to have Baker Mayfield as my quarterback, because we've seen how that's gone with the Cleveland Browns the last couple of years. It just hasn't worked out. And if I were a bad team, I wouldn't want Baker Mayfield as my quarterback, because he might make me good. Well, not good, but good enough, right, to not get the early pick that you covet. And that leaves like this small slither of teams that kind of just want to make the playoffs because they have stunk for a while and it would make their fans happy, right? That's where the Browns were pre 0-16 era, right? Where we just kind of wanted to make the playoffs. So like we're kind of familiar with that mindset, but not a lot of teams are in that area right now. Either teams are good and they want to be good, or they stink and they want to stink. You know what I mean? Like Baker Mayfield's like the mid-range jumper. Like there's nobody who wants to utilize it anymore. So it's just a rough spot for him, man. And it's going to be hard to get rid of him. So I think the release is probably coming to him. Signing Clowney, though, it's a good sign. Obviously, the money still ain't an issue there. 1 year, $11 million. Now, what does this mean for this team going forward? One, I think it's going to be helpful for a guy like Alex Wright, right? So I think the plan here for the Cleveland Browns is we'll bring back Jadevon. We're going to try to make sure that Jadevon can be Jadevon this year. But hopefully by year 2, Alex Wright is ready to step up and be a starter. I have my doubts, but we'll see about that. And then they can go on and stick with Alex Wright, save some money, you know what I mean, by not bringing back Jadevon Clowney, because that's when the cap starts to get a little bit tighter for this team, right? The thing to look forward to for the Cleveland Browns over the next couple of years is they're going to make a transition, right? The last, I would say 3 or 4 years, the Browns have been pretty used to being able to throw significant money at issues on their roster at free agency because they've had the cap flexibility and the money. And not saying that they're not going to be able to be players in free agency in the future or anything like that. They definitely will. It's just at this same level, they probably won't. So you would see the Browns wanting to make sure that their young investments pan out at a higher rate than what they have, you know, on the defensive line especially, right? So that is something that they're hoping to pan out because they got to find, I've talked about this for a while, the Browns have to find some long-term solutions on the defensive line. If you sit here and ask me right now, which players on this defensive line do you think is going to be on this team in 4 years? You'll tell me Myles Garrett. We're going to hope for Perrion Winfrey. And then everybody else to me is a gigantic question mark, right? Like I have no faith that we're going to have anybody else on this defensive line. That's not a place you want to be at, right? You want to have more players that you're confident that you're going to want to re-sign, that you're going to want to bring to a second contract and all of that, and that you can have be productive right now on their rookie deals. And when we look at Jordan Elliott, there's no confidence there. Tommy Togiai, you know, the confidence on how high that ceiling is varying. And we saw what happened with Malik McDowell, where the confidence was there in Malik McDowell, but then Malik McDowell, you know, he probably ain't never going to play NFL football again due to some off the field decisions. So that is kind of the situation the Browns' defensive line has been in. Look, bringing back Clowney, it's a nice fix for this year, and you'll be fine for this year. But also, we need to start evaluating this Browns defensive line group a little bit tougher, just because this is the one group on the team where, you know, if you ask me who's going to be the starting cornerbacks for this team in 5 years, it's going to be Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, and maybe Grant Delpit is going to be the safety, right? And that strong safety, they'll have a plan there. If you ask me who the best linebacker on this team is going to be in 5 years, it's going to be JLK. You ask me who's going to be on the defensive line in 5 years, again, that's a huge question mark. You don't have those same questions with the offensive line. You don't even have those same questions. Like, there is reasonable confidence that one of these young receivers for the Cleveland Browns is going to be here in 5 years, right? David Bell, Donovan Peoples-Jones, if not both of them. That might be the future of your wide receiving core right there. Obviously, quarterbacks got that locked up for 5 years. We'll see what happens with the whole suspension angle. But yeah, it's one of those things where everything's pretty set on this team. Everything seems like it has a nice pipeline going, but you look at the defensive line, it's been Band-Aid fix after Band-Aid fix after Band-Aid fix, and you would hope that they use this opportunity this last year that they're probably going to be able to get on Clowney at this price, and hopefully they use that time that they buy themselves with that $11 million to find some long-term solution, right? Maybe Alex Wright works out. Hopefully we feel pretty good about Perrion Winfrey, right? But we need more of these guys to work out, right? And it needs to start happening now. That's why I was always in favor of drafting 2 defensive tackles in this draft, just because I felt like there's been a deficit of solid young rotational defensive tackles that this team had that they could throw out there on Sundays and feel reasonably good about. It's been a lot of duct tape solutions, right? Taven Bryan is a duct tape solution. He's not a long-term solution. So this is kind of where the Browns' defensive line is. I think they're fine for this season. Obviously, they're going to be all right. Myles Garrett, Jadevon Clowney, Perrion Winfrey, whatever happens on that third spot, you'll be all right. Good pass rush potential. Obviously, there's not much to predict here. We've seen Myles Garrett and Jadevon play on the opposite side. We've seen that be really successful, and we've seen young players flourish in between them, like a Malik McDowell did last year. So now we insert Perrion Winfrey instead of Malik McDowell and see if he can have that same kind of impact. I'm confident that he could have a greater impact because I think Perrion's just a great player. But that is kind of the situation there. I'm glad the Browns have brought back Jadevon Clowney. I think the money is right. I'm not, by the way, look, I'm just going to let y'all know, I'm not the guy that's going to sit here and try to tell you all the cap math, not because I don't know it, well, it is partly because I don't know it, but also I think people who try to act like they know the salary cap, they don't intentionally lie to you, but they're always going to end up lying to you, because the reality about the salary cap is that it's malleable and that the rules that we follow outside the NFL to try to see what the salary cap is are just outdated and have been found a way to be worked around. So we don't really whenever somebody is in your comment section and you're talking about wanting a player and you tweet that out and somebody goes, "Oh, you can't do that. We got no cap space." Silly. And they aggressively tell you that you can't do it. It's usually bullshit because teams find a way to do it. So, that's why I'm not ever going to care that much about, what the cap implication is of all that, because the longer I've done this, the more I've done this and the more experience I have doing this and talking to people who actually deal with the cap, the more I realize that focusing on that aspect, the number aspect of it, is pretty pointless. People are going to do it and people are going to justify it and people are going to be mad if I call it out and say, I don't know what I'm talking about, whatever. But the longer you do this, the more you realize that cap number, focusing on it, it's just a talking point. It really doesn't matter. It never really comes up in a great deal. And the only time it comes up is when a team's being cheap or when they're not willing to make things happen to keep another player. It's always about the will. It's never about the actual amount. So that's it with the Jadevon Clowney deal. I'm interested to see how much of that $11 million is guaranteed just for his own sake, because Jadevon, man, I'm gonna be honest with y'all, he's had a rough run, right? He had that great Pro Bowl run in 2014. He switched teams and he just got injured year after year after year. And now he's at the point where he had the season that would have made him buckets of money 5 years ago. Well, not 5 years ago. Yeah, 5 years ago. Wow. And now he's at the point where he can't even get that money because nobody trusts that he's going to be healthy. He's had a rough run of it with these contracts. I think he's going to be looking back at that at the end of his career and be like, man, I could have made so much more money if I would have just stayed healthy, but you can't really control that. But yeah, man, I'm happy to have Jadevon back. Him and Myles, that is an absolute necessary thing if this team's trying to win. And the Browns got that done at a good price, I guess. And yeah, Jadevon Clowney back in the Cleveland Browns. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Are you excited? I am. Let me know.